colleagues, I would like first of all to thank the organizers of this event for giving me the opportunity to present the dynamic approach to school improvement and refer to results of studies investigating the impact of this approach on student learning outcomes. In my presentation, I will refer to my own experience as a researcher. And as you've heard earlier, my field of research and experience is in the area of educational effectiveness. We've heard something during the first presentation about educational effectiveness research. Please allow me to mention here that ER basically addresses the question on what works in education and why. So basically, it looks about factors that are associated with student achievement and attempts to explain why these factors can contribute to student learning. During the last 3 decades, ER has been improved considerably. We have nowadays specific methodological approaches such as the multi-level modeling techniques, which enable us to have some more efficient estimates of teacher and school differences in student achievement. In regard to the theoretical component of the field, progress was also made through a more precise definition of the concepts that are used within ER and the relations between the concepts. However, the whole process has not contributed significantly to the improvement of school effectiveness. And here it comes a starting point for our research team. Back in 2003, we attempted to develop a model that takes into account the dynamic nature of effectiveness. It's based on evidence and can contribute to the establishment of stronger links between research and practice. This model is basically based on the assumption that teaching and learning situations are dynamic processes, and therefore effective schooling should be treated as a dynamic and ongoing process. So during my presentation, I will first of all provide an overview of the dynamic model, and then very briefly refer to the studies which have been conducted during these 12 years in order to test the validity of the model. Then the main part of the presentation will be the approach that was developed based on the dynamic model. So I will refer to the main features of DASI and the major steps. And finally, to experimental studies which have been conducted and attempted to identify the impact of DASI on student learning outcomes. That's more or less the structure of my presentation. Let's begin first of all with the model. As you can see, the model is multi-level in nature. So basically, it refers to factors which operate at 4 levels. Starting from the bottom, it refers to factors that have to do with the student. A very important part of student achievement gains can be explained by student variables. Then, the classroom level factors, the school and the system level factors. The teaching and learning situation is analyzed in the model more deeply, and the role of the 2 main actors, teachers and students, are explained. So more emphasis is given to these 2 levels, especially since we know from many studies that the classroom level is much more important even than the school or the system level for explaining variation of student achievement. The assumption for the school and the system level is that these 2 levels can have an impact on learning outcomes through improving the teaching practice. However, the model also assumes that school and system level can have both direct and indirect effects on student learning outcomes. On the top of the figure, you can see that a specific framework is used in order to measure the functioning of factors, which are situated at the 3 levels, the classroom, school, and the system level. This framework basically refers to 5 dimensions: the frequency, focus, stage, quality, and differentiation. The frequency is an attempt to measure quantitative characteristics of the functioning of factors. And most effectiveness studies in the past used only this dimension in measuring the factors and their association with achievement. The dynamic model referred to 4 other dimensions. focus, stage, quality, and differentiation, which basically collect qualitative characteristics of the functioning of factors. I hope that later during the discussion we have the opportunity to give some more concrete examples. Here, the use of this framework is not only important for measurement reasons, and something that I like to stress. We introduce these 5 dimensions in order to emphasize that it's not only important to look at the quantitative characteristics. So we also look at the dimensions from a theoretical point of view. And finally, by using these 5 dimensions and collect data on the functioning of factors, more comprehensive strategies for teacher professional development as well as for school improvement purposes could be introduced. So that's one of the reasons for introducing these 5 dimensions. I won't go into much detail on the factors that are situated in the student and the classroom level. And since the conference is about school improvement, I will stick into the school factors mainly. In the transparency, you can see that we examine basically 2 aspects of school policy. School policy for teaching and school policy for creating a learning environment at school level. So looking at how you improve the school learning environment. And why only these 2 aspects of school policy? Because these are directly related with the learning that takes place inside the classroom and outside the classroom. The factors that attempt to measure the policy, they don't look only on policy documents. What we try to measure is the actions that are taken by the school management team in order to help teachers, parents, the various stakeholders to understand what is expected from them to do. And we've heard about clarity in the previous presentation from the work of Fuller. In addition, we look at the support that the school management team offers to teachers and other stakeholders to implement the policy. So when we look at policy, we look at actions basically taken to improve teaching and actions taken to improve the school learning environment and the support that is offered to those that are expected to implement the policy. Let me mention here that the model has a term, we call it dynamic model. Why? Because we believe that both policy on teaching and the school learning environment are continuously changing. So you need also to look at evaluation. So the model also refers to school evaluation, and especially the evaluation of policy for teaching and the evaluation of the school learning environment. So at the end, at school level, we have 4 overarching factors: the policy for teaching and the school learning environment, and the evaluation of policy for teaching and the evaluation of the school learning environment. Let me be more specific, giving some more information about each of these factors. In regard to policy for teaching, you can see in the transparency that we look at different aspects of policy of teaching. First of all, quantity of teaching. What we assume here is that effective schools are those which take decisions on how to maximize the use of teaching time. So you look at how the school management team deals with issues such as student and teacher absenteeism, lesson schedule, timetable, management of teaching time, various things that may reduce quantity of teaching, basically. The model moves a step forward. It doesn't look only on quantity of teaching. We move to look at provision of learning opportunities beyond those that are offered to the official curriculum. For instance, we examine the extent to which the school attempts to make good use of various extracurricular activities for learning purposes. So quantity of teaching, learning opportunities, and quality of teaching, the third aspect, implying basically that it's not enough to take decisions in order to maximize the time and the learning opportunities. You also need to support teachers to improve their teaching skills, and through that to improve the quality of teaching, which is going to have an effect on student learning outcomes at the end of the day. I move now to the other aspect, the school learning environment. I'm going to be more brief in regard to this aspect. In the school learning environment, we look at 5 aspects of the school learning environment. We don't look at the school climate in a very broad way. We concentrate on those aspects of school learning environment which were found to be associated with student achievement. Some of them are more directly related with learning, such as the first one, because learning doesn't take place only inside the classroom, but also outside the classroom. For instance, during break time. What is the policy that is in place for monitoring student behavior outside the classroom? The other two, the number 2 and 3, try to influence learning indirectly. So teacher collaboration, for instance, the assumption here is that can contribute to teachers' learning, and through that to improve the quality of teaching, which is going to have an effect ultimately on student learning outcomes. The same with partnership policy. Is not only seen from the perspective of how the school learning environment can be improved by developing a more effective partnership policy, but also how the home learning environment can be improved through the actions that can be taken from the school management team. Let's move now to the second part. The studies which were conducted since 2003 in order to test the model. We conducted 6 longitudinal studies during this period, some of them in specific countries, one of them in 8 European countries, and 2 meta-analyses, 2 quantitative syntheses. The first quantitative synthesis was looking at studies conducted since 1980 in different countries, which looked at the effect of teacher factors on student achievement. Whereas the second was concerned with studies looking at the effect of school factors on student achievement. These 2 meta-analyses and the longitudinal studies, which were conducted in various countries, provided support, as you can see from the table, to the main assumptions of the model, and also revealed the importance of teachers and school factors for explaining variation in student achievement gains. In the next transparency, you can see references to papers which were published, and these papers present results of the studies and the meta-analysis. I'm sorry that I don't have the time to go through each of the study. I'm going to move, due to time constraints, to presenting the DASI. What are the special characteristics of the dynamic approach? The first special characteristic is that DASI has its own theoretical framework. As I mentioned earlier, it came as a result of the work that we have done initially in developing and testing the dynamic model. So, it has its own theoretical framework and refers to specific factors that need to be considered in introducing a change. Which factors? Those which were briefly presented to you earlier. So we are talking about specific school factors and more focused intervention. The second, obviously, we take into account that school stakeholders are those who should take decisions on which improvement actions and tasks should be implemented in their own schools. However, we see that schools, naturally we've heard about that in the morning, that schools also need supports. An advisory and research team is also expected to work closely with schools, sharing its experience and knowledge with teachers and helping them develop their own strategies and action plans, which are expected to be in line with the knowledge base of ER. And you will see later in the figure that we see both the advisory and research team and the practitioners, the school stakeholders, to work together, sharing the experiences and using them during the interventions. Finally, DASI emphasizes the role of evaluation. So we see that evaluation has a critical role to play. First, in identifying the improvement priorities of each individual school, because this could not be the same. What school A does might be different from what school B does. So you need evaluation data to identify the improvement priority of each school. And secondly, for establishing formative evaluation mechanisms in order to monitor the implementation of the improvement strategy, and in order to be able to develop as a school your improvement strategies and action plans during the process of implementation. In this transparency, you can actually see the steps of this. The first two steps are basically concerned with the establishment of clarity and consensus. Clarity and consensus first about the general aim of any school improvement project. For us, well, in the area of effectiveness, we strongly believe that any school improvement project should aim on improving student learning at the end of the day. And it's important to establish clarity and consensus about the general aim of school improvement. And secondly, about the importance of addressing specific factors in order to promote learning. That's step B. As I mentioned earlier, step C, at the very beginning of a school year, for instance, we have the evaluation data. You collect data, you analyze them, and you identify your improvement area as a school. And then you are expected to design your own improvement strategy and action plans, and not only your own formative evaluation mechanisms in order to monitor the implementation of your strategies and action plans. DASI considers summative evaluation also important. So at the end of this school year, summative evaluation takes place in order to measure the impact that the improvement strategy has on improving learning and improving the factors that are addressed by this specific approach. Let me spend a few minutes on each of these steps. First of all, clarity and consensus about the general aims. We know from the literature that it is important for each school to start with a clear understanding of the destination. We know that we need to establish commitment of collaborative work. However, people have different perceptions of change. So it's quite difficult to establish clarity and consensus, even about the general aims of a school improvement project. And here, the role of the R team, the advisory and research team, is quite critical. They need to support school stakeholders in order to understand that student learning should be considered as the ultimate aim of any school improvement effort. Let me move now to the second step. Let's say that we managed to pass through step A. In step B, what we try to do with the schools that are involved in the experimental studies that I will present in a few minutes is to give them usually a handbook where ideas about actions that can be taken in order to improve the functioning of school factors are there. Obviously, the advisory and research team is expected to support schools towards this direction. However, schools stakeholders at the end of the day should not only be aware of the fact that this list of factors is important. You should also explain them how these factors are related with student achievement data and why. For this reason, when you develop your strategies and action plans, you expect them to adapt these ideas that are included in the handbook, the specific actions that can be taken by the school, to their own situation. And in this way, to identify your own strategy and action plan. But before doing that, you need to identify your improvement area. So the step 3 is the collection of data and the identification of your improvement priority. Here, again, the art team has an important role to play. They can help schools collect data. For instance, there are instruments that were used in the previous studies in order to measure these factors. These can be used to collect data about the functioning of the school level factors. The AR team can support schools in analyzing the data and identifying the improvement priority. And then the improvement area has to be announced to the whole school community. And we hope that through this announcement we will be able to get feedback from the school stakeholders, define in a better way the improvement area in a way that the various school stakeholders, parents and even students will be able to understand why we are addressing specific factors. As I mentioned earlier, at the next step you need to develop your strategies and action plans, making use of the handbook, making use of ideas that are in the literature, but also taking into account the abilities of those who will implement them. And that's a critical point. For this reason, you cannot go and adapt what is in the handbook to your own school unless there is the capacity to implement specific ideas. And obviously, when you try to do that, there is no magic solution. You may make some mistakes. And that's why you need to have the formative evaluation mechanism I mentioned earlier in place. And why do you need the monitoring of the implementation? In order to identify your own weaknesses. The weaknesses of your own strategies and action plans. On time. What we try to do with the schools is to visit them at least once every 6 weeks. Look at what's happening. Sharing with them experiences and trying to redefine, if there is a need, their own improvement strategies and action plans. And we always run into a nice surprise where you see things that were not implemented as you had in mind at the beginning of the school year. Problems, practical problems that didn't allow you to implement the specific strategies and the need to redefine them. At the end, as I mentioned earlier, let's say at the end of the school year, you need to have a final measure of what is happening with student learning outcomes and with the school factors. And why do we consider summative evaluation important? Because we believe that positive findings through summative evaluation may increase the commitment of a school to this approach. And also for practical reasons. Summative evaluation may reveal that the factors which have been addressed during the school year have been substantially improved. So what you need is during the next year to look at how you are targeting a different factor, a different improvement priority. We see school improvement on a continuous basis, and later on I will refer to projects which have lasted for more than 4 years. Finishing my presentation, I only have 5 minutes as far as I can see, and I have to be within management time with a very brief presentation of the studies which were conducted. We have 5 experimental studies which were conducted in order to test the impact of DASI. The first 2, number 1 and number 2, were basically concerned with the use of DASI for teacher professional development reasons. So I'm not going to go through these studies. The one compared DASI with the holistic approach and the other with the competency-based approach, the 2 dominant approaches to teacher professional development. The other 3 studies looked at the use of DASI for school improvement purposes. As you can see from the transparency, these studies reveal positive results about the impact of DASI Obviously, the effect sizes of these interventions were not huge. We're talking about small effect sizes, but important. And let me also mention number 4. Number 4 was a European study. It was conducted in 5 different European countries. And in this study, we also made use of DASI, and we even managed to find effect on reducing bullying and through that improving student learning outcomes. I'm going to take just a minute on the last one, which is the last study. It was conducted especially in socially disadvantaged areas. So this study was an attempt to identify the impact of DASI not only on promoting quality, student achievement gains, but also equity. It was hard, really hard for our group to manage to have an effect in this area. It might be related with what we've heard in the first presentation about the difficulties that we have as educational effectiveness research to look at these specific areas. However, during this year, the last year and this year, we have a European study looking at promoting quality and equity by using DASI, and we expect that in order to address equity, we will also need to expand this framework. And I hope that in the future I will be able to say some better results about how to target equity. Equity is a really big challenge for our team, and we hope that at some stage I will have some better things to say. References to the studies are shown in this transparency, and information about the projects can be found on our websites, and if you are interested, you can also see the more practical examples on how the projects were implemented. Thank you for your attention, and let me wish to the people from Napoli that your football team will be as successful as Juventus last night. Thank you.